Record, or I forget to do that. So welcome everybody. I'm really excited about hosting this session today on a topic that's very close to my heart. For those of you who don't know me, I am a former primary school teacher and a mother of 4 children. And 19 years ago, when I had my first child, I founded Educating Matters to support working parents and carers. And we're a team of teachers, psychologists, coaches, and work globally with a broad range of companies and the public sector to support working parents on lots of key topics like educating children, positive parenting skills, D&I, integrating work and family. And a few years ago, a US law firm asked me they said they wanted to engage dads more. And they asked if I could run a session just geared specifically for fathers, which I did and have run many times since. And it was exploring how the role of a father has changed and how dads can build a really strong connected relationship with their children. And having run this session, it also gave me a chance to explore some of the particular challenges that dads are facing at work. And most of the dads I meet today, I mean, I've been working with parents for 25 years, but over the last years, I've seen dads who are really striving for the healthy work-life integration just as much as mothers. And they are feeling that same pressure to have it all. And flexible working should not be something that's just associated with mothers. Anyone in any circumstances, with or without a family, can benefit or may need to work in a more agile way. So today's session evolved very organically. I befriended these 4 dads on LinkedIn over a period of time, and they grabbed my attention because in one way or another, they were all discussing the experience of working dads and integrating work and family. And a few weeks ago, I invited them to write guest blog posts before Father's Day, which generated lots of interest. And then I think it was Brian suggested it, that we should all come together for a chat. I named them the 4 Fab Fathers, but since then they've decided to call it a boy band reunion. And because we've been so busy chatting, I forgot to launch a poll. But while they're busy introducing themselves, I wanted to just get a sense from you, what do you think is the biggest challenge working dads are facing? But let's have you guys introduce yourselves. Brian, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Let me just move the poll out of the way. I'm Brian Ballantyne. I'm British, living in Luxembourg. I wrote a book called Confessions of a Working Father, which was a series of LinkedIn posts that kind of evolved into a book. And I have 2 children, Gabby, who's 13, and Daniel, who's 11. So yeah, really pleased to be as part of the boy band reunion.
And Ian, I'm just doing it in the order you're appearing on my screen.
Hi, my name's Ian Dinwoody. I'm a coach. I specialise in helping stressed dads balance work and fatherhood. I've got 2 kids myself. I've got a 10-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. And I've also had 2 stints as a stay-at-home dad in the past. So I kind of bring a different kind of perspective, I think, to some of the challenges. Look forward to discussing things today with everyone.
Okay, and Dan.
Hi, so I'm Dan Reed. I head up digital and platform delivery at Barclays, and I also started Career Dad last year. I've got 2 kids, so I've got 5-year-old Theo and tomorrow 1-year-old Xanthi.
Thank you. James.
Hi, I'm James Miller. I am editor of workingdads.co.uk, which is a website for men that want to work flexibly and part-time and all that sort of thing, and author of 2 books, one called The Gender Agenda, which was about how boys and girls are treated differently from birth, and most recently Dads Don't Babysit, which was an agenda for equal parenting. And I have 2 children who are now 12 and 9. So yeah, we've all got plenty to talk about, I think.
Yes, quite a lot of kids between us.
Rachel, I think I moved the poll out of the way when I was doing my intro. Simon said that you couldn't complete the poll. I don't know if you want to
is that why no one's doing it?
Sorry.
Ah, okay. Let's launch.
I forgot that I was like a host. There we go.
Oh, I see. So you shoving it out the way.
Yeah, I
No,
moved it out
so
of the way and ruined it for everyone.
it's now blocking my. I was thinking, where's everyone gone? Okay, brilliant. So I
Multitasking.
wanted to start by just like well, in the UK, we are, I don't know what that looks like, we are slowly easing out of lockdown. But let's begin by just understanding your experiences. So just kind of a few thoughts on what would you say were the positives, whether you're talking about work or family. Some positives of lockdown. Who wants to? Should I just pick someone? James, we'll do the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious positive is people have had time with their family now. I mean, that's not a positive for everyone, depending on the size of your, your property and how your life works out. I mean, let's tackle it early on that we're four white middle-class men who have probably had a fairly similar experience and probably fairly pleasant experience of lockdown, in as far as lockdown has been pleasant for anyone. But I think, it's given a lot of people the chance to have real quality time with their family, not just the day-to-day. I mean, this weekend, my daughter's club and cricket is back on, and we're getting back into the wheeking children from one thing to the next. Whereas in lockdown, obviously, we had to spend time together. We weren't just on the hamster wheel sort of thing. So I think that's been positive for most people. We really began to sort of deeply think about what it means to be part of a family and to be a dad. And my other big positive, which I mentioned on Ian and I's lockdown podcast last week, was you can eat whatever flavor crisps you want because you haven't got any meetings in the afternoon. I mean, this is one of the big wins. You don't just have to eat plain crisps. You can eat whatever flavor because you're not.
I don't know about that because if I have something garlicky for lunch, I still feel bad about it. So I'll still like brush my teeth or have a coffee or something. Just so.
So Brian, what would you add to that in terms of your experience?
Oh, it's been great having more time with the children and kind of going out together into the forests. I've done a lot more kind of walking myself, so not having to kind of be in the office the whole day and kind of presenteeism. Just if I haven't got any meetings in the morning, I'll just go for like a 10K hike in the forest or something and just kind of really kind of work on kind of being mindful, because I think mental health has been really strained these past kind of 4 months, and I think we need ways to kind of to decompress, and so that's been great. Getting more kind of balance, not having to commute's been great as well. So had some great weather, at least at the start. It's been a bit crazy.
And Dan, I think we lost James. I hope he comes back.
Sure he will.
Dan.
Yeah. So I think from a family perspective, so as I say, I've got a young daughter as well as an older son. So she's nearly spent half of her life in lockdown, give or take. And so the amount of time that I've spent with her has been fantastic, and just being able to see those milestones and actually remembering back to the relationship that my son and I had when he was that age, which was me working a lot and, sometimes not being there in the mornings or the evenings. I'm able to do things which might seem quite benign, but I can get her to sleep, which is a real big win because it's not, reliant on my wife to do it, which was the case with my son. And then from a work perspective, so I live in Northampton, but I work for a very London-centric organization. And so I spend, some of my time traveling between the two, but sometimes I'm not able to do that. And, when you're the one person dialing into a meeting in a room in London where everyone else is physically there, you're kind of at a bit of a disadvantage. And this has removed that. So it really doesn't matter where you are, you have as much of an equal voice. And, things where people would say, oh, the sound quality's bad, oh, it doesn't matter, it's just one person on the line and 10 people in the room. Now it's a problem for everyone. So I think it's really democratized the voice, which has been fantastic.
Okay, and Ian, how about you?
Echoing what James said, really, in terms of the family side of things. Walks, movie night we've brought in, which we haven't previously done. So kind of every Saturday night, kids choose some really strange films. Beverly Hills Chihuahua 3 was the low light of our movie sensations, I must admit. But I think eating together actually is one of the things. Eating together regularly as a family has been something that we didn't often get to do because my wife worked very long hours with a long commute. And so actually being able to have lunch together and then eat in the evenings as well, it's been a real standout. I mean, it doesn't always happen because, you know, best will in the world, Lisa has a lot of calls to do, but that's been a real change for us. But I think, you know, what James was saying before in terms of it's not an equal playing field is that, you know, I think there's a lot of thought initially that, you know, COVID was you know, affected everyone equally, but in some ways, yes. But I think, you know, for many people, very different experiences depending whether you're furloughed, whether you're fear of losing your job, whether you know your home circumstances, how much space you have, how much outdoor space. So, you know, I'm particularly grateful for the opportunity that we have for living where we do. But yeah, it's been great from a family perspective, definitely.
Right, okay. So I've just realised why it stopped. It's just so annoying at 100. This is, it's annoying because I had got a capacity for 500 and for some reason it is not registering it. So I've got a whole barrage of emails of people trying to get in, which is so annoying. Anyway,
what are you doing with that? Yeah, I just wanted to speak now. Paul made a point in the comments, which some people have echoed, which is kind of working dads getting in their own way sometimes, not recognizing, you know, their options, their path, not reaching out for help. Sally said the same thing. It's pretty cultural for men not to reach out for help. And I'd agree with that. I think society does encourage us to kind of take things on our own shoulders and not reach out for help. It's a sign of weakness. But I really encourage other dads to kind of ask for help when you need it. And there's 4 dads here who are happy to be contacted on LinkedIn if you ever want to have a conversation. But yeah, asking for help and taking control of it is a great step.
Yeah,
great comment, Paul.
Kind of leads us into what were some of the challenges, would you say? Anybody? Whoever wants to go first.
See, Hacker's just stole my internet, but I'm back now, so I can come back in on the challenges. I don't know what, well, I do know what happened there. Hacker stole my internet briefly. I tell you, one of the big challenges is finding time for yourself, or time for yourself and your partner. Because if you are a family, then you're suddenly spending a lot of time together. And, you know, you need, well, anybody, whether you're a man, woman, child, you need time on your own. And in a couple, you need time, you know, to keep that relationship going and not just mum and dad all the time. So I think that's been a big challenge, is finding the time and space to work on your own mental health and your relationship. You know, I won't go through my big long list because I'm sure you've all got other ideas, because there's been plenty of challenges, let's face it.
Okay. What would you say, Dan?
Yeah, I think time. I think actually a lot of people have said to me, oh, you must be loving the fact you don't have a 2-hour commute to London each way anymore. And on the contrary, actually, I miss that, because that was my time. I could read, I could watch Netflix, I could play my Switch. That was my time. And now I kind of go from 8:59 downstairs with the kids to my 30-second commute upstairs into this room and work. And on the one hand, incredibly thankful that I have this space to do that. But, you know, someone said to me, well, why don't you just, you know, practice some mindfulness 15 minutes before work to separate the two? And I'm thinking, I love that, but that means that I'm going to wake my wife up, who's been up for the majority of the night, you know, with the baby, and go, can I just have some mindfulness? And you do, it wouldn't end very well. So I think that's tricky. And I think the other thing is actually the sheer volume of work and people actually getting to know people's communication style. So for me personally, I don't like my phone just going off without, you know, someone just calling me out of the blue. I don't like that, because I could be talking to myself, or I could just be doing something that doesn't warrant that. I much prefer a WhatsApp, can I call you, or something like that. And I think but again, that's just my preference. Other people prefer just to get a random phone call. So I think it's just learning each other's style and actually being open to say, please don't contact me in this way where possible, but please do this way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Anyone else want to add anything further?
Yeah, the only thing I've lost about my commute is listening to Dan Reed's excellent podcast, which has been recommended to everyone.
Thank you.
It's been like, I don't know, I was thinking today, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like it's just basically done a total reset on that. So in 1 minute you're kind of working along, you know, on your self-esteem and higher things, and all of a sudden it's like, is my family safe? Like, I was really panicking. My 11-year-old was going to get COVID. I didn't know, what do I do? Can I help? Then it's like, have we got food? What the hell are we going to cook 3 times a day? We have to, wear a mask to go to the shops. Now, how are we going to keep that feeling of belonging when we're all isolated? So it just feels like a total reset. But at the same time, kind of being able to get that self-actualization through going on walks and just thinking, like, was it really working the way before? Like, no, do we need to go back to that kind of normal, or do we need like a new kind of normal? So yeah, that's been an insight I've had.
Okay, I think we'll move on to some of the other juicy questions. So not nearly as not nearly as many dads work flexibly as moms, and there are obviously financial considerations, but dads often feel stigmatized for taking time out and worry about how it will affect their career progression. We can see that the culture of presenteeism seems to be come out as the biggest challenge, with 42%. And a lot of dads I speak to say they can't say they want to leave work early to go to a sports day or an end of year school play, and don't want to openly request leave for that purpose. And as you guys must all be familiar, that the Daddy Life Millennial Dad at Work research last year found 63% of working fathers had requested some form of flexible working, but less than 1 in 5 had that request granted. Now, I passionately believe fathers need to be granted the same opportunity as mothers to work flexibly, have compressed hours, work from home, and job share. So now that we've all experienced working flexibly and remotely during lockdown, what do you think are the implications, for dads in the future, and what key lessons should we take from the past few months? So let's start with Dan. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so with the question, because I'd argue we actually haven't been working flexibly. I'd say this is probably the most inflexible ways of working, that it just happens to be from home. And I think that's actually one of the challenges in itself, because, when we went into lockdown, some people said to me, oh, this is the thing that you've been campaigning about. Oh, no. This is very, very different. But I think, having spoken to a lot of dads, there are dads I've spoken to who have never worked from home before. They're now working from home full time. And, there's 2 I can think of in particular that say, I want to be an itinerant worker. I never want to go back to the office. I can do my work here. I can be around the kids more. What is not to like? So I think that's a huge win. I think the thing, presenteeism comes up as a cultural thing time and time again. And I think the way that we need to challenge that, and the way that I try and challenge people with that, is thinking, well, when it comes to setting your work objectives, your goals for the year, they're never location or time based. They're all outcome based. It's, I am going to improve conversion rates by X, or I'm going to deliver these projects on, or whatever it is. So why do we have these metrics that are outcome based and measure them by where we are and when we are? It just doesn't make sense. So I just think, hopefully, I'm a big believer in the fluidity between work and life, and hopefully that shows that, yes, I might be doing emails at 8 p.m, but that's because I'm not doing anything at 3 p.m. because we're going off for a walk, or we're just playing some Switch. So I think hopefully it's showing organizations and people, because as Paul said in the comments, I think sometimes dads can be our own worst enemy. Hopefully it's showing that it is possible to do these things, and actually it works.
Mm-hmm. And Brian, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, to build on what Dan was saying, I think a lot of companies have held back from offering flexibility, and now they've been forced to, and found that for a lot of people they like it, but some people still would prefer to be in the office. And I think from my mindset change. So in the past, the default would be going into the office, and maybe the exception would be working from home. But now it seems like working from home should be the default, and then the exception is going into the office. If I've got a meeting, like, it doesn't, to kind of trek into a shared space through heavy traffic, just to sit with people I'm going to be emailing or not even talking to, and then coming home, it seems like a waste of time. And I've heard it, companies like Microsoft are already doing that. So they've got people who are the default kind of remote, and then will come in occasionally. So I think there's a great opportunity. I think some companies are still going to be conservative in their thinking, that they don't necessarily trust their workforce unless they can see them. And I think people are going to move to companies that embrace the new flexibility. So I think it's going to hopefully be a revolution in flexibility, and some companies are going to shine and really flourish, and some are going to realize they need to invest in their employees.
Do you think it really will in the long run? We're not just going to kind of go back to the old ways.
I don't know if anyone in my team works listening, but I got a new job yesterday in a different team because I saw that there was more of an opportunity there in terms of, it's a remote team, and there's flexibility. So I'm a small sample size, but I see other people doing that, men and women, for a variety of reasons, whether because they're parents or they're caregivers or they've got other things they want to do in their life. So yeah, that's my hope. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I think that people have seen what it can be like, and might not want to go back to how it was before.
I mean, James or Ian, do you want to add anything to that, or have thoughts on what I'm going to ask next?
I'll just briefly, just talking about flexible working. I mean, I agree with Dan entirely. I mean, I wrote a blog right at the beginning of this saying this is not flexible working. Don't let anybody try and pretend that it is. And you mentioned that, very few men do flexible working. Certainly according to the figures, it's like 4% compared to, I can't remember, it's about, a lot higher for women. I've got 36% in my head, but it might be higher than that. But men do work flexibly. They just don't work formally flexibly. Don't putting in a formal flexible request makes you like a woman. No, that's a whole different seminar to be had about the patriarchy and all that sort of stuff. But saying to your boss, either at his desk or when you're out playing golf at the weekend together or whatever, oh, do you mind if I nip off early on Friday because I've got sports day or whatever? That's flexible working, but it doesn't appear in any of the figures. So I do think it's growing, and I think one of the key things about flexible working through all this is genuine flexibility, because as Brian says, some people want to go into the office, and that's fine. When I wrote Dads Don't Babysit, it was all about genuine choice. Now, I think men should have lots of paternity leave, and they should stick around and be taking on, an equal amount of parenting. But that's not for everyone. What we need to get to a situation is where people have genuine choice about how they work. So if they want to go in the office, they can. If they want to be at home, they can. And for most people, it'll be a mixture of the two. But it has to be not prescriptive, as it has been previously prescriptive going to the office. We need to make sure we don't switch to a prescriptive system where everybody has to be at home. It has to be genuine choice.
Okay. Yeah. And you can see from the polls that 82% of people, which is a huge number, plan to work more flexibly in the future. We can't go backwards now, but I wonder what kind of result we would have had if we'd asked that question beforehand. Only 2% are saying no, and 15% maybe. So that's kind of, I mean, I know it's a small poll, but that says a lot. And really, even just over the last few days, I keep seeing all this exciting news, just one at the top of my head, Fujitsu announcing a permanent work-life shift program offering unprecedented flexibility, others talking about flexible hours, working from home will be standard wherever possible. And I would say, a very positive, optimistic person by nature. But I do wonder, is this really going to drive authentic change? Is it really going to be culturally acceptable for men to feel whichever kind of sector they're working in, that they can work reduced hours or from home? Or like I said before, we'll be drifting back to the old ways. So what kind of guidance would you give to companies looking to support working dads to improve their experience at work, so that they're kind of able to be great employees and great dads? So Ian, could you share your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's about treating everyone as individuals, really, and not just seeking to pigeonhole men and women in terms of assumptions around certainly caring responsibilities. I think the pandemic has shone an enormous light on the opportunities and the challenges around shared caring responsibilities, certainly in terms of in terms of this conversation about mums and dads and looking after children who aren't in school or in other caring situations, and having to share the load. And there are plenty of studies that suggest that women have done a lot more, and men have also done more, but maybe not as much. And there's lots of historical reasons behind that. But I think business has been really, really careful to treat everyone as an individual and to really seek to understand what kind of support they need in terms of their caring responsibilities. How does their work need to be structured in order for their family unit essentially to function effectively in the ongoing months? It's very easy to assume that men don't really have caring responsibilities. It's going back to something that James said in terms of structural flexibility. It's one thing to have a conversation about next week, can I pick up can I leave a little bit early? I need to pick up the kids from school, which is almost an element of optionality there. I did a presentation last year at ExxonMobil. Every single one of the dads in the room had flexible working arrangements, but they were very informal. They weren't structurally built in. Structurally structured. Flexible working that's built into the day-to-day and then built into your contract is something that's required for carers. And what we need to do, I think what businesses need to do, is to seek out an understanding what genuinely do every member of their workforce need in terms of flexible working and remote working, and look to treat people as individuals, not just assuming that men don't have caring responsibilities. Because we're going to the summer holidays at the moment. Schools aren't open. Most childcare provision that people would normally have turned to at this time of year isn't there either. There's concern about the economy and job security, and so men may not feel able to push back and say, actually, I need to be at home more than you might want me to. I can't really go back to how it was before. So that just doesn't really work for the family unit. So I think it's about treating everyone as individuals and really digging deep into what they need in terms of flex and remote working.
And my argument has always been not just for parents. Someone could have a caring response. You could be wanting to write a book, climb a mountain. Yeah. Everybody, sometimes people just be more productive if they have an opportunity to also spend time doing other things that are really important to them. And so, lots of mothers say, I'm doing a 5-day job in 3 days. Like, when you have less time, you actually end up being more focused and productive, and you could feel energized, maybe not when you're looking after your kids, but you might feel energized in the time that you're out of work. James, what are your thoughts and recommendations for companies?
Yeah, I noticed it's already getting picked up in the chat already. There's a lot of points that I was going to make that are being mentioned. One of which is limits. There has been a danger with this working from home experience, that particularly because we're having to homeschool as well. That's been my experience, is that I don't really get anything done until 3 o'clock. I sit around the kitchen table and I try and get some work done, but there's massive distractions sitting doing his maths and English, and that's fine because that's how it should be for him, because that's how it would be for him at school. But I can't get any work done till 3 o'clock, and then dinner gets made and I have to come back to the computer at 9 o'clock. And that's flexibility, but there's a danger there where suddenly the working day becomes the day. So I think companies need to be very aware of limits, and employees need to be aware as well, making sure they put limits on when they're available. I think one of the possible bonuses to all this that I think companies need to be aware of and cash in really is, I've been on furlough for 3 months and I came back to work last week, and I have a much better understanding of what it's like for a woman coming back from maternity leave now. Now, I don't claim to be able to understand that fully, but I get what it's like to have been out for 3 months and then come back and try and get up to speed and click back into the work sort of processes and all that sort of thing. And I think a lot of men will have had that experience.
That's a really good point. And even, sorry to interrupt, even if you haven't been on furlough, just that kind of transitioning back to commuting and going to an office, almost like replicates that experience a little bit, because we've been in our protective bubble and now we have to kind of go back outside, which is what women experience when they've just had a child.
It's a great opportunity to sort of say, okay, how did everybody feel about that? That's what women have to do. Now, now we've all experienced something similar, how do we put that together and change things going forward to make it easier for everyone and understand how tricky it can be to return to work and all that sort of stuff. There's a very particular point we're at with regard to that. And I think there's an opportunity there for employees to think about that. And it's been mentioned in the chat. I mean, the classic one is role model. You know, flag up people that are doing this well in your company, and more men will feel able to copy their example. I particularly draw attention to the McDonald's boss, Paul Pomeroy, is quite amazing at that sort of stuff. He told a story earlier this year in a podcast about how McDonald's wanted to have their global meeting somewhere. I can't remember, it's like Thailand, but it was a week where he has to be at home and his wife gets to go and do the traveling for work. So he just said no to his big bosses. You know, and I just thought that is hell of impressive. And men need to do that, to stand up and say, look, I've got other demands on my time, and you know, be loud about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing during this period is, when even I've experienced it, when I chat to some of my clients and I say, how are you? The answer is very different to normal, and we're being a lot more open and communicative because we have this whole shared experience. So much of it is down to communication, and sometimes maybe, you know, employees have been a bit scared to say what it is that they really need. And to be fair to, you know, sometimes line managers can stand in the way, but also they're not mind readers. It might not have even occurred to them that somebody wants to, you know, create different boundaries or work in a different way. And if you don't ask, you know, you don't get. They just maybe assume someone's going to say no.
Yeah, and I think certainly my experience with working dads is that a lot of companies, certainly most of the companies, I mean, clearly the ones that I did work with at Working Dads are already open to this sort of stuff, but they want to do it, but they don't know how. So make it easy for them. You know, they want to help. So like you say, if you're an employee, I think a lot of employees would be surprised if they do ask for flexible working, that they'll get a very fair hearing these days.
Mm. There's lots of chat been going on. I think, Dan, you've been responding to some. Have you seen any really interesting points?
Actually. So what I've been just discussing with Peter around it seems about turning back to a new normal, and if he's got looking after his kids as a single dad, and how is he going to do that? And it resonates with a conversation I've had with two other dads throughout this. There was one who wasn't a single dad, but his partner worked night shifts in care homes. So he, in effect, was a single dad during the day. And he was working in recruitment, and he had a 20-month-old daughter, and his company were expecting him to have the same output as before lockdown. And he was quite worried about, well, you know, I've probably got 30% capacity. How do I have this conversation? I don't feel like I can, you know, cold call people with a screaming child in the background. And I think part of it is actually conversations like this, right? It's that collectivism. It's everyone's in the same boat. And, you know, from my, like, we started this and I had my baby with us. She's now gone, as in my wife's got her, as in she's fine. But it's that recognition that everyone is in the same boat. And if someone was cold calling me with a screaming child in the background and they said, I'm really sorry, but I'm looking after my daughter whilst trying to do my job, I'd go, I recognize that. Cool. That's actually an icebreaker. So I think, and you know, to Pete's point, and there was another guy as well, and kind of talking what Pete was saying, or, you know, he's saying now I'm future proofing. So the concern is, I'm thinking about when we have to go back to quote normal, and how am I going to deal with this? But we're not there. And this is a conversation that I'm having time and time again with dads who are saying, you know, I've built up such a relationship with my kid, and I'm really worried about how I'm going to not be around anymore, and how's that going to impact their, you know, mental health and all of that. And for me, it's just about that signaling. It's just, we're not going from where we are today to 5 days a week back in the office tomorrow. And actually, I don't think that's ever going to happen. It's all, if we're at step 0, don't look at step 10, look at step 1. And so some of that is just around, you know, to Pete, I'd say, well, have that conversation with your line manager that says, when we do go back to something that's different from this, then this is something I'm going to have to think about. And I'm just letting you know now. So it's not a big, you're not actually asking for anything, but you're saying that it's going to be a problem. So I think a lot of it just comes down to that signaling.
Yeah, and it kind of continues the theme of how we've been functioning at the moment, which is very much, because there's so much uncertainty, we aren't planning weeks in advance. Things are happening very quickly, and we've got into that mode of we're taking one day at a time. So what you're saying, Dan, is really like we're thinking, right, when life's back to normal and we're doing this and that, just work micro steps at a time, and then we'll work out where we get to at the end of all those little steps.
Absolutely.
Anyone else got any thoughts, or should we see what kind of questions our audience has? I feel so bad and so annoyed that I have purchased a longer license for a wider number. I'm getting some angry emails. We were so excited to attend, but we will definitely share a recording, and also this chat is really powerful too.
One comment that came up, I mean, some people you have to change it to all panelists and attendees or only we can see it, but someone asked, like, what's the definition of flexible working? And I think as us with our kind of laptops and kind of working in office-based jobs, it's one thing, and it might just be doing the same job, but from different locations. But some people do want to work 50% or 80%, or they're working in an environment which could be like, I know I've got a friend working in the cargo center, or they're working in a factory where you can't work from home because it's physical work that you're doing. And I think we need to be considerate of all kind of job families and all situations. It's not just about office workers having their laptop at home. It's about really getting part-time roles. And I think the number of part-time roles has decreased in recent years because people think you can just do your job from home. But if you're caring for either a small child or caring for someone who's elderly, or you've got other things in your life you want to do, you need to have those strict hours. And then you fall into the trap that a lot of women have fallen into, is that you get paid less and you end up doing 5 days anyway. So how do you get part-time hours and part-time work? So I think there's a whole range of kind of flexible working. So that whole definition of what is flexible working is quite an interesting question.
Yeah, but it's kind of giving people autonomy to, I mean, this is what I say, if you're having a bit of a challenge with your kids, the secret is always to let them be part of the plan, let them be part of deciding on the structure of their day. Even if they're only 4, would you rather get dressed first or have your breakfast? And that's a very basic human need, that the more that you give people the autonomy to control their time and trust them, then people step up.
And if I may, just on that flexible working, because last year I did a workshop on flexible working for workers who were in a factory, and the first thing was, in a warehouse. They were pickers in a warehouse picking up, and the first thing they said is, I don't even know why I'm here because I can't work from home. And the long story short is the conversation around that. Well, actually, if you're outcome focused, I said, for example, if you're expected to pick 100 items within a day, and you do that between 9 to 5 because that's what the expectation is, what if I said, once you've picked those 100 items, you can finish your day? And this started a conversation, and it ended up with them saying, oh, like what we do on Christmas Eve. And I said, sorry, what do you do on Christmas Eve? And they said, oh, we do this thing that's called like pick till you drop, and you all have your allocated things. And then once you've finished, you then go for the day and spend time with your families. I go, right. So why aren't you doing that every day? Why, you're already doing it. I said, what happens on that time versus the other days? You go, oh, well, yeah, we're really productive. And, everyone's, there's all this camaraderie. No one's messing about. You go, oh, yeah, it's funny that, isn't it? So I think that, yes, it isn't just working from home. And yes, we obviously, as we've said, very conscious that we're all kind of laptop, office worker types. But they're definitely flexible working. If you look at it at an output base instead of a time base, you're able to get more out of it for everyone.
Yeah, I think that sounds like some of the management consultancy projects have been involved in the past, Dan. It's like, well, what if you do this? Oh, funny you should say that. Like, yeah, exactly. I think being creative, and I think something that, what you said before, Dan, in terms of, and I think we've all said about creating allies and understanding that you're not just one dad on his own kind of fighting against the system. There are lots of other people in the same situation. It's very easy, partly because I think men, we're quite good at taking, we've talked about it before, taking on the load and taking on the responsibility for getting things done and for being brave in some ways in terms of the circumstances, but seek out other dads and other parents who are in the same situation and get together and exchange notes, talk about the pressures that you're facing, and talk about some of the ideas and some of the things that other people have experienced, which will help you to get through it. And I think that's really, really important, because I think it's something that men as as a sweeping generalization, I don't think we're that good at doing it and networking in quite the same way. And I would say that's a really important thing to do.
There's such an important point raised in the chat, which I've heard in one way or another from so many dads. It says, the difficulty with asking for flexibility is you worry if the answer is no, there will be further consequences in terms of career opportunities in the future, which makes the risk assessment skew to the downside. And this dad's actually said they've put this in their calendar as a private meeting. I mean, that is back to that fear of not even asking or talking about it, which is so real.
And it's what women have been putting up with for years. I mean, that's kind of the problem with this. It's like, come on, boys, you know, it's not okay to say, oh, well, you know, what about my career? If you're willing to your partner's career to go to stall for that very reason, it's not okay to step out yourself. I do think that's a large part of this is, there's a few people saying, you know, they've asked for flexible working and then, you know, bosses have said no, or, you know, around this working from home lockdown experience, there's been issues with men feeling uncomfortable about just pushing it. They've asked, been told no, and they don't feel comfortable then saying, well, I really need it, though this is going to have to happen. So this is why events like this, I think, are really helpful, is that we just need to be talking to each other, making it feel normal, repeating the arguments over and over again, so that when a boss does say no, if you're an employee, you can say, well, here's the argument. You know, I've heard it. I've been to a webinar a week for the last 6 weeks, and so I've got the argument clear in my head. But of course, the other side of that is the employers, who really need to be recognizing the benefits. And that, I think, you know, there's so much uncertain at the moment, but one of the big uncertainties is, of course, what is going to happen to the economy. And that will very much feed into how bosses view, you know, flexible working, D&I, all that sort of stuff. If the economy does sink, then we're going to have to be out there making the case even louder than ever. But I remain quite hopeful that the economy is going to bounce back, but I'm not an economist. But I think we have to be aware that there's a situation in which it does go south, and you know, we're going to have to speak very loudly and very clearly about the benefits.
Yeah, I get it though. You know, not wanting to ask for flexibility, worrying about your career and what that's going to mean. But my question back would be, are we actually asking for flexibility, as in those words, I want to talk to you about a flexible working, or are you asking for, like, you know, I want to go to my kid's sports event? Or because I think that there is that real distinction between the formality and the informal. And I was thinking about this as James, you were talking, and I don't actually think I've ever asked for flexibility. I think I've just done it, which is a problem in itself, right? Because the way that I like to work is, I know what is expected of me. I know what I expect of myself, and I will deliver it, and just kind of leave me alone to get on with it. And I'll work some silly hours, but that's because I'm doing stuff in the daytime, and that I'm going, you know, when school was open and it's the summer, I'll pick my son up and we'll go get an ice cream in the afternoon. And that's the kind of thing. But I've never said to anyone, or I've never asked, am I okay to do that? Because I just know what is expected of me and what I need to deliver. So one of the questions would be, do we actually need to ask for flexibility? Now, yes, if you're looking to have a formalized contract in place that needs to be very, a rigid, flexible working, one for a better word, then, which is just an alternative working pattern, then yes. But actually, for the majority of us, is it that we just need to be able to, especially in times like these, plan our working day and integrate that with our family life a little bit more? I just suggest to do it, because then it's a lot easier retrospectively. And I've done this, turn around to my boss and say, well, actually, that's how I've been working, and you've been really happy with my output. So is there a problem, or is there not? And there never has been.
So maybe it's that word. We shouldn't.
Yeah, I think so.
As much, because it kind of defines something that isn't. There is that big difference between formal and informal.
Yeah. It's the connotations, isn't it? It's I'm asking for flexible working. Well, that's what returning mothers ask for.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
I think Shimba sent a comment just to the panelists rather than to everyone, but making a point about intersectionality. We're for white men, which is kind of slightly awkward at this time. Shimba's describes himself as the only black man in the office, and so I think, if you are, a dad, and say you're black, or there's other ways in which you're marginalized, that must be even harder for you as well. So I just wanted to kind of call that out as something to be mindful of.
Absolutely. Does anyone listening in have any particular questions or areas that you feel we haven't really covered, or you want to explore a little bit more? Because it would be good to give the audience an opportunity to ask us some questions. Just trying to read the chat as well. Anyone else picked up on an interesting point in there?
There was
the last one.
Well, there was one in the Q&A about how you ask for reduced hours without end up doing a full-time job in 3 or 4 days, which I thought was an interesting one, because that is always the danger. And again, it's something that women have been experienced for some time, that idea of I'm going part-time, or I'm doing reduced hours, but you end up doing the same amount of work, and actually you end up doing lots of hours you're not getting paid for. But yeah, I did wonder about how you make the case for, I want to do 4 days rather than 3, and how do you end up not doing the work, the same amount of work in that 4 days. But I think a good employer, and I've spoken to Aviva quite a bit because they're amazing on dads, and one of the things they sort of talk about around shared parental leave and extra paternity leave is the opportunity to bring on other employees. So if a dad goes off for 6 months, it's an opportunity for somebody else to step up and try that job for 6 months. And I just wonder if that's also something to think about. If you want to go down to 3 days, you can present it to your employer as an opportunity for somebody else to step up and learn the ropes for 2 days or 1 day or whatever. I think it has to be seen as an opportunity to actually increase the skills in your company, rather than some sort of threat because people are going to be doing less work.
And I think it's a good trial for the individual as well, because I know that there was a point in time where I thought, I want to do 4 days a week at my day job, and I want to do a day a week on Career Dad, and so was looking to maybe formalize something like that. I ended up with a lot of holiday that I needed to take, so I just had 6 weeks of taking every 1 day a week off to try it, right? See how it went. What I found is that didn't work for me. That was terrible. So actually, if I would have gone into that, this is what I want, and 2 months in realized that just didn't work for me, that would have been pretty bad. So I really like what you're saying, James, around that trial. How can we get to a place where we're trying things? And I think that if people are saying, well, actually, how do I get to a place where I want to do this 3-day week or 4-day week and see if it works? I'd start with that. There's very few managers I've come across. Actually, there's no managers who I've come across who I've said, I want to try this thing to see if it has a better output. Can we do a test for and as you would with anything, qualitative and quantitative testing, do a poll at the start, do the test, do the poll at the end. Did it work from both ends? And I just think it's very hard to then argue with data.
There's something on the chat about shared parental leave, which is obviously, still we've got this, James is, but I've heard this as well from chatting. I speak to thousands of dads every year, and the other thing, it's not just your employer, it's your partner feels I've earned that leave, and then the dad thinks they're taking that away slightly from the mum that's carried that baby for 9 months and earned it. And do you think that is one of the reasons why the take-up is not as high as it could be? And what do we do about that?
I'm conscious I've just talked a lot, but I've had that. That's the conversation I had with my wife, with my daughter. And that's one of the reasons that I haven't taken shared parental leave.
Read my book. It was bound to come up at some point here, wasn't it? Let's face it was bound to come up. Go get on Amazon. It's Brian's company, so you're helping Brian as well. Get on Amazon and order Dads Don't Babysit. The reason people aren't using it is partly because of the patriarchy, and it's seen as something that a woman does and has done since the year dot, and partly because it's not properly funded, and absolutely partly because there is no dad element. I mean, what's going on there? Yes. There is an issue with men taking leave away from women, and that is clearly a problem. You cannot be reducing women's rights in order to improve fathers' rights. So we need more paternity leave. I mean, that's the answer to that. Is if you don't like it, don't blame your wife. Get out there, campaign, write to your MP and ask for more paternity leave so you can have that extra leave. But I don't think men, it goes back to some very fundamental issues around male and female roles. But fundamentally, it's about communication with your partner, making the case to them, saying, look, it will be better for me, it will be better for my child, it will be better for you if I take shared parental leave. The benefits are clear for everyone and all set out in my book. So it's about communication, but you shouldn't feel guilty about wanting to be a dad. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And hopefully, you can come to some sort of arrangement. There you go. I mean, right, Dan says he didn't take shared parental leave, but then he talks about switching to 4 days. So, if you want to do it, speak up. And if the communication with your partner is good enough, and you've just had a baby, so you should have a decent, hopefully the communication with your partner is, she's somebody you can communicate with, or he, or whatever the arrangement is, hopefully you can come to an arrangement that works for everyone.
It's back to that word communication again,
yeah.
whether it's with your partner or...
I think it's a really good point. It's come up a few times in the chat. It's about aligning if you're in a relationship, it's about aligning as a couple in terms of what your ultimate objectives are. I think too much of conversation, I'm putting my coaching hat on now, is about where we are now and and modifying things around the edges. What I get my clients to do every time, first thing that I always do, is do an exercise called Be, Do, Have. And it's to understand as an individual, as a dad, first and foremost, who do you want to be, what do you want to do, and what do you want to have? And once you're clear about that in your own mind, you can then open that up and have a really open and honest conversation with your partner and start to understand what they want to do. How do you want to design your life so that it works in concert with those elements that are really, really important? I think sometimes we get caught on this sort of this wheel of life, and we keep moving on in the same direction without ever stopping to maybe reflect about whether it's actually aligned with how we want to live our lives. And that element of communication, both that sort of Rachel and James have mentioned, I think it's so important, so that you're both working, you're both looking in the same direction together and not just looking inward or focusing on individual sort of projects, but make it aligned so you're both bought into it.
And just on the communication, have that conversation before you have the baby, because when the baby arrives, it's a lot harder to have a grown-up discussion because you're very, very tired and grumpy all the time. But yeah, I think couples, you need to have that conversation well in advance about what role you're going to have as a mother and a father if and when that day comes.
Just picking up in the... Sorry, go on.
Yeah, go on, Dan. No,
I was just saying, picking up in the conversation, Roberto saying, I hope things are going to change a lot in the next 5 years. And this links back to one of the other points around, how do we ask for flexibility or, reduced hours? And, I think some of it is going to happen organically, partly because of the Gen Z workforce that is coming in. So spend quite a bit of time speaking to university students and kind of school leavers and about what they want to do from a career point of view and what their thinking is. So many are talking around what I'd say is portfolio careers. There's one guy who's working at Tesco 16 hours a week, but also trading FX on the side, also doing YouTube. And, he's bringing, this one guy in particular I'm thinking of is bringing in about $1,000 a month. Now, sorry, $1,000 a week. So he's bringing in, and he's 19, right? And he's bringing in a pretty sizable salary as a 19-year-old, but it's £200 from here, £150 from here, £300 from here. And he's like, well, I don't want to change. I don't want to do one thing. I want to work in a coffee shop and also write a blog and I think that then, the corporate workforce has to evolve for that, because you're going to have these corporate jobs that are allowing someone to do 15 hours and someone else to do another 15 hours, because the workforce are going to say, well, no, I don't. Why would I want to do one thing full time? That's ludicrous.
Such a good point. Even that idea of our especially our parents' generation, you just had one job for life. That is, huge, so many people do complete career changes and shifts. My 19-year-old is starting to sound a bit like that one. I can't imagine him
Encourage it.
having one job either. Yeah, he's also been trying to work out what to do during this period.
Brilliant.
Yeah, seeing more of that. So when you're managing, like, 20-year-old interns, you're seeing that they're like thinking about passive income, or the work and life boundary is more blurred. And people will say, but this is how I did it, and then their parents will say, but no, you have to work this full-time job for 20 years. But the just expectations are totally different. So without wanting to mansplain Dan, yeah, I totally agree, and I think it's causing a lot of tension for people who have a persona for work and a persona for home, and when that's kind of shifting all the time, it's creating a lot of psychological tension. But I think from Generation Z or from other people, where they're just themselves and kind of like they work here and they socialize there, and it's kind of much more blurred. That's how things are probably going to move forward.
And we've all experienced that blurring, because we have had meetings in our kitchens and in our, like never before. We're humanized during this period, I think. So, any last comments that any of you are desperate to say? I was going to ask you, what's the one fundamental change you want to see happening, but I don't know if we could pin it down to one.
I think there's a big change that I would make, and I think we're expecting society to change, and for our jobs and our managers and our governments to give us all this change. What's worked for me, and through a lot of work, is to change myself, and to try not to be afraid of what the situations might occur. Try not to be afraid of what it might say for my career, but just think I'm a role model to other dads coming after me, and I'm not going to be afraid anymore. And I'm going to speak out, and I'm going to blog on LinkedIn about being a working dad, and doing laundry when I'm supposed to be working from home. And it's got a great reaction. And I think let's just change ourselves and try not to be afraid and ask for what we want.
It's authenticity, isn't it, as well?
Exactly, and let's not wait for everyone else to change. Let's just push ahead, bravely, and asking for what we want. And if there's enough of us doing that, it will change things.
And I think, just to build on that really quickly, if you want to do something and are worried about how you're going to be seen and what your progression means in that company, then I'd be asking, is that a company that you want to progress in anyway? So maybe it's just a shortcut to realize you might not be in the best place if they're not supportive of who you are as an individual.
Yeah, you asked for a one-word sum up of what we want to happen, and I wrote down awareness. Admittedly, it took me a while to remember why I'd written that. I wasn't aware, but I think it's just awareness of, to follow on what these guys have said, is awareness of your role in all this, an awareness of why we're doing it. And it is, well, certainly in my case, and I think for all of us, it's about equality. We're not doing it because we think men are hard done by and they should have, more time off with babies. We're doing it for equality, I think. And awareness from employers about the benefits. Hopefully they've seen that over the last 3-4 months.
Our minds will be way more productive when our kids are actually where they're supposed to be.
Absolutely. You can work differently and be just as productive. An awareness of who their employees are and what they have going on in their life, and the benefits they can have from recognizing that. So, that's my takeaway word is awareness.
And I've got one as well, mentoring. I think new dads mentoring is so important. I think that first time when you become a dad, and I'm sure every dad's got a story that actually back of their mind, even when you think you're prepared, you're really not, and you're not prepared emotionally. And I think connecting within businesses, connecting more experienced dads with new dads, just to give somebody a bit of one-to-one support so they can talk about the pressures they're under and the pressures of balancing work and home life. I think that's really, really beneficial for everyone involved. Whenever I've been involved with something like that, amazing outcomes. So that's my word, mentoring.
Yeah, I've just decided while you're speaking that mine's communication, but I've already mentioned that. But this was great fun and generated lots of discussion. We might have to let a few months lie, see as we take more steps, and maybe do it again.
Reunite the band.
Yeah, but just as time evolves, and look how things are changing. But if anyone listening in has any thoughts or ideas or ways of starting this, well, the revolution has started, hasn't it?
Hopefully.
And I think if people are listening in and they want to connect with any of us, most of us are pretty open. If you want to connect with us on LinkedIn or Facebook or anything, happy for people to do that. And I think it's great to catch up again in a few months' time. Who knows where the world will be, but definitely good to reflect on it again.
Yeah. Well, thank you,
Absolutely.
everybody, and enjoy your weekends. It's quite nice doing it on a Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you for organising. It's been great.
Anyone have any feedback, takeaways, further thoughts? Please continue to share that with us in the chat. We will keep it open for a while. But thank you for being part of it.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to leave loudly
Thank
now.
you.
Okay.